Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Pantheon Plus. My name is Jerome Cuson. You can find me on Twitter at JeromeC1985. This week, we will be continuing our run of Michelle Yeoh's early work from her time in Hong Kong. Basically, we're exploring like the first 10 years of her career. And this week is an interesting one. We will be discussing the action romantic comedy Wing-Chun from 1994. My co-host is, as always, Brian. You can find him on Twitter at Brian to Brain. Brian, I have to be honest. I think this movie, we've watched a lot of Michelle Yeoh action scenes over the course of this month. This one probably has my favorite of all of them, but I can't help but think this is also, from a plot standpoint, there were some real cringy moments, and the fact is there really isn't. We watched a weird dub of this on YouTube, a French dub of this movie, so I don't think that probably doesn't help our case. But from a plot mechanic standpoint, there's a lot of weird stuff going on in this movie that does not work at all. Because it goes into kind of the wacky rom-com angle, which I know some people are into. I'm not as into romantic comedies, so this movie didn't necessarily work on me. But again, in terms of the highs, there are some high highs in this movie.
Yeah, so the version I watched was actually the Cantonese version. I found it on some website. Because I found that same version that Jerome found, and I was like, eh. And then I was like, do I pay the $5 on Amazon? But I couldn't figure out if the one on Amazon to rent was either going to be a dub or a sub, and I didn't want to risk the $5, so I was just like, I'm gonna find a bootleg version of the Cantonese version. And 2 minutes later, I found it. The only problem is it would stop at certain points, and I would have to like reload the page or whatever. And that happened like 5 or 6 times, but it was fine. I still had an enjoyable viewing of this movie. I like romantic comedies. It just depends on the romantic comedy. You know what I mean? I think some of the tropes they used in this movie did have me laughing because I've seen that in other romantic comedies and sitcoms or whatever, and it was working for me in terms of that. But then you get to the pervy cringiness of the men in this movie, and every single male in this movie, even Donnie Yen, is a perv, and like yeah, they really emphasize that. I think they're trying to show how kind of pervy, I don't know, it's just some of these men are, and not just in Chinese culture and Hong Kong culture, but like all over the world. And it's kind of representative of that. And yeah, it was cringy at times, but I couldn't help but laugh at some of the, the romantic comedy stuff. And then the action stuff was great. This was very much less street fighting in the police story and more choreographed martial arts fighting. And I don't know if you noticed, too, I think the sound editing was much different than the previous movies we've seen, because it felt like the blows were it sounded much different. Like they recorded something else as opposed to like using whatever traditional sound they use, but it sounded much different. And the fight sequences sounded much more like physical. Like it sounded like the blows were harder, so to speak. You know what I mean? And it felt like that's what they were going for, because a lot of the times in the movie, post-fight, a lot of these characters are just like feeling it like later on, like they're just like hunched over, like, oh shit, I feel like shit right now. And it's like, are you okay? It's like, yeah, I'm fine. It's just a fight. So that happens a couple times to Wing-Chun, played by Michelle Yeoh. And I kind of appreciated that because it kind of showed like, oh, the cause and effects of fighting.
The one thing I will say is I do think you get some great boss fights. Michelle Yeoh playing Wing-Chun, and she ends up fighting the flying chimpanzee, the leader of kind of the local bandits group. Some really fun. I think that's where the movie is kind of at its best, especially that fight when they're on the mountain and they're basically bouncing up and down on this like this pole. I think that is the fight that really sticks out to me, and that's, I think, the best action scene that we are going to be discussing in this month of podcasting. So that's kind of where I'm at, and I think that scene stands out. Is almost worth watching by itself, even if the rest of the movie doesn't totally work. But this, from a plot standpoint, this is probably the most complicated plot that we will be talking about. So the movie kind of begins. We have this character, Wing-Chun, as played by Michelle Yeoh. She is in charge of a family tofu shop in a mountain village with her father, her sister, and her aunt. There's some local bullies that try to forcefully marry her during her youth, but she trained to become a kung fu practitioner to fend off bad men lusting after her beauty. but her prowess ends up scaring away suitors because men have small penises and apparently can't deal with the fact that a woman could be good at fighting. She is the only person out of all the villagers who will stand up to the local bandits. These bandit brothers are known as the Flying Chimpanzee and the Flying Monkey, which is pretty funny. There's a young and beautiful widow named Charmy who comes to town. And she, of course, catches the eye of the Flying Monkey because, again, every male is a pervert in this movie. Wing-Chun rescues this helpless widow and gives her a job in the family shop. And, of course, this riles the ganders of the Flying Monkey and the Flying Chimpanzee. So what I think is most interesting about this early sequence is I think in a lot of movies what ends up happening is you would get the local widow, or you would get this woman who is, of course, a damsel in distress. And normally you would get like a male suitor to save her and they would fall in love and get married. But in this case, it is Michelle Yeoh's character, Wing-Chun, who does the saving, and we get that great initial action scene.
Yeah, a lot of complicated things going on here, and like this whole idea of misidentifying and pretending to be someone else. Like that's such a rom-com sitcom thing to do, and then it ends up into this chaos and confusion, and then you end up with scenes where you get Michelle Yeoh pretending to not be Wing-Chun by acting as someone else. You know what I mean? And it's almost like that Bugs Bunny thing where she's acting as Daffy Duck, pretending to be someone else or something like that. So it's there's this complicated thing going on when it comes to these scenes where she's pretending to be someone else, and Donnie Yen is trying to thinking that the widow is Wing Chun. So there's that complicated trope right there of misidentifying and thinking that falling in love with someone else even though you're really in love with the other person trope going on. So that was what had me like, okay, they got the rom-com stuff going mixed with the martial arts stuff, so it kind of started working for me. But man, they were just like, those men in the village were just all over the widow. God damn, that was so like, oh man, just cringy. But I will say this, like the actress they picked, man, she is pretty stunning, man. Like the way they shot that, it was almost as if time stopped the first time she was coming down the river, and everyone was just taken aback by her. So I was like, okay, I kind of get what's going on, and she's very beautiful. But man, that was kind of cringy. But I guess it does help that she doesn't end up with someone at the end, like almost all the other female characters do, except her. And the reason she is a widow, she literally comes in with her husband's dying body on a raft, and they're just like, oh wait, you have a husband? Get out of here. And I was like, oh, Jesus, man, just help her. Jesus. And then Wing Chun is the one that has to step out and help her. You know what I mean? Being the hero of the village. So I also like that idea too, that Wing Chun is kind of like this hero of the local hero of the village. You know what I mean? And just almost becoming this legend, just to fend off bandits or whatever. And so she becomes this public enemy number one for the bandits. And that's kind of what brings in some of these bandits to fight her. So it all kind of makes sense. And then, of course, you got Donnie Yen, who was the best friend of Wing Chun when they were little. And then once that incident happened with the bullies, he felt kind of inept and was like, okay, I'm going to go train in martial arts, come back, and then win your hand in marriage, which is not a good idea either, to be honest. But he comes back and he's confused because he thinks that, oh my God, all the men in town are clamoring over the bean curd lady, and he thinks the bean curd lady is Wing Chun.
And we get some gender confusion, of course, because he thinks that Wing Chun is a man because, again, women are not allowed to fight. So
oh my God, this part. Oh my God. Okay, I was thinking the whole time, she is clearly not a man. Clearly not a man, right? They don't even put less makeup or no makeup or hide her face or something like that. She is clearly a woman, and when that happened, I was like, okay, come on. You really thought that Michelle Yeoh was a man? Come on. Come on. She was too beautiful for that. You know what I mean? I was just like, come on, bro. You really thought that she was a man? Come on.
I mean, this is not a very subtle movie. I mean, there's literally a scene very early on with Wing Chun injuring the Flying Monkey in a night duel. hitting him with a fireball and rendering the guy impotent. So this is not a subtle movie. They're clearly going for a very specific message about men and women, and I guess this had to be a thing like in the 90s in Hong Kong. And again, I can't speak to the specific cultural zeitgeist of what's going on in that area, but what I find to be most interesting about it is just the borderline misogynistic tendencies of this movie, and it really hurts my enjoyment of the movie. And specifically, like, you and I think have become big fans of Donnie Yen because of Rogue One and Blade 2 and John Wick, the most recent John Wick that he was in. So you and I, we like Donnie Yen, but this movie was not a good showcase for Donnie Yen. And that might be its cardinal sin, is the fact that there's a couple really great moments with her and Michelle Yeoh fighting together. I think those work out. But just in terms of Donnie Yen as a character, I don't think it works out. And we don't really get to see him kicking a lot of ass either. And maybe that's by design, because maybe this is designed to be more of a Michelle Yeoh movie. But to me, if you are going to bring in Donnie Yen, like, he should be kicking just as much ass as well.
He did have his fair amount. I think towards the end, it was more focused on Wing-Chun, because he wasn't involved in the final fight. It was all Wing-Chun and one of the big monkey boss, I'll call him. But yeah, it just felt like, well, for me, I felt like at least I could see, this is the first time I've seen Donnie Yen act not so much as a stoic badass, and just kind of almost like trying to be a normal person. I mean, for that time frame, whatever time frame this is, like, I don't even know, like, I don't even know what even time frame we could even say this, but it's like past, in like 100 years in the past, at least 200 years in the past, this movie takes place. So we got to see him act kind of like not so stoic and kind of be normal. And I was like, I've never seen Donnie Yen act like this. This is kind of interesting. So for me, I was like, okay, this is a little different for me, but at least I get to see him like in a different light. And then him trying to do comedy was interesting as well. And I thought he was kind of pulling it off. And I was like, okay, I guess he can do the comedy, because he was trying to be sort of funny in Rogue One, but he just can't. He came off more of a badass, which is fine, because that's what, that still works. But here, he's definitely going for the comedy for sure. He doesn't get, beat up one of the bad guys at the end, but he does, get to beat up a lot of henchmen or whatever, and a lot of little bandits that are supporting the monkey gang or whatever. So he does have his moments, but he's not the star, and I get that. He's just supposed to be the love interest, and he's second fiddle, which is fine. But just some of the stuff, like, yeah, it's very misogynistic, and it's just like, I think the message is every male in this movie is a fucking asshole, horn dog, misogynist, and even Donnie Yen's character is. But I think the idea for him is that he kind of has this arc where he has to learn a little bit, you know what I mean? Just don't assume that, like, Wing Chun is a man, because, I mean, you're looking at the same person, all of a sudden, like, once he finds out it's Wing Chun, he's in love again. So it's like, oh, now you realize that it's not a man, and you realize it's the love of your life. So just little shit like that. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at on that. And then in terms of like the tropes, like I mentioned before, like this does play into the tropes of like romantic comedies and stuff. And I have my fair share of romantic comedies. I even like The Lake House, which is not even like a comedy, but it's a romantic movie, and I dig that one a lot because that has time travel and Keanu Reeves. So shit like that kind of gets me. And the ending was interesting too, because it felt like it was just like, okay, the men are just like under her control now, right? Like, I guess that's the message of the movie, is that like all the men had to succumb to her because all the men were assholes, and she finally was the only one that was like thinking rationally and
right. She's the one that clears out all of the bandits. So yeah, I mean, she should not only get to run the place, but she does get to marry Pak To in a wedding celebrated by the whole village, and that's kind of the ending of the movie. Which, I mean, it's nice that they gave her the moment of being married, but I mean, realistically, what dude is good at it? Like, given what she has done and given the behavior of all these men, why in the ever-loving hell would she want to get married?
That's the other thing too. Like, that's the other plot point of this movie. She does not want to get married. But I think what in her head, like, I think in her head, she's thinking like her master never wanted her to get married. But then when she meets her master later on, she's like, you should get a man. And she's like, oh, so you do want me to get married? So I think her idea of not wanting to get married stems from the fact that she thought her master didn't want that for her, and that like the kind of woman that she is now, like she doesn't need to be married, but deep down she wants to and doesn't want to admit it. I think that's what it was supposed to be. But by the end of the movie, it's like, yeah, why marry this dude? But again, like it's kind of ridiculous because she wins the fight. She doesn't kill the bad guy. The bad guy kind of just bows down to her, and like, we worship you now. And every man in the village or every bandit after that was just bowing down to her. And then that was the end. And I was like, okay, I guess they kind of figured that one out. Like it was just kind of like a funny ending to it. And I guess it's kind of a romantic comedy, so that's what they were going for. So this ending of them bowing down to her, I guess, was like the proper ending for what they were going for.
I would agree with you. I think that is very much the vibe that I was getting as well. And again, I think this is a tough movie to talk about as well for different reasons than the Heroic Trio. I feel like this is very much a movie that is not necessarily in our wheelhouse because we have not really talked about a lot of romantic comedies. And I mean, look, there've certainly been romantic comedies that have been discussed on this network. I'm thinking about When Harry Met Sally. That's what Ben and Matt talked about recently. There Will Be Movies. And again, there are certain romantic comedies that I certainly enjoy as well. But I think when it comes to this movie, it's like the comedy just seems very off. And I don't think that this movie from a humor standpoint works. And I think that what's separating me from like giving it a full-throated recommendation is the fact that the comedy is not as good as it should be for me to really embrace it fully. So that is kind of where I come down on this movie, is that I do like again, to me, the strengths of this movie, I'm looking at the costumes, I'm looking at the set design. I could see where Mulan maybe borrowed some of its set design. What did you feel about that? The set design and the costumes.
I think it's just this era because have you heard of Once Upon a Time in China?
I've heard of it. I've never seen it though.
So I've seen like clips from those two movies with Jet Li and I think Donnie Yen's in one of them too. But they were like early '90s as well, and it's that kind of look that era's going for, those like that. I don't want to say ancient China because it's not ancient, but it's probably what, like 500 years ago in China, and that's kind of the look of those of that era of movies that they're trying to do, because a lot of those kung fu movies as well do that era like they did here. And I think it's just that whole era of time from that late 80s 90s period where those visuals come from. Because like if you look at Once Upon a Time in China, like Jet Li looks like he could have been in this movie as well. You know what I mean? Like that look of that classic style. So I think it's just this era. But I still, like, it probably had an influence no matter what, because like Mulan was 98. And of course, like they needed some kind of like, reference, and I wouldn't be surprised if they used this as a reference. But yeah, like I can see it. But for me, the colors were still a little off. Like it didn't feel like vivid colors. It felt like watered down colors. I don't know if that makes sense, because it wasn't as vivid and bright as I thought it was going to be. Like even though they shot a lot of it during the day, which I appreciate, and the sets were practical and looking real and everything. So in terms of that, I think that I'm kind of in the middle because I felt like it could have done better with the colors. The soundtrack was okay. It wasn't memorable. But yeah, I think it's all about the performances and the fights in this one. The comedy, like I mentioned, hit or miss for me. Like I got some of the jokes. There were some jokes that landed for me. The annoying aunt was funny at times, but then it got too much at times. I was like, okay, this is getting too annoying now, and it's too whatever. And then some of the male characters were just getting on my nerves. So I guess that's the point, because these male characters are not really redeemable people and like just awful people, even their father. So yeah, just a little weird for me, but I'll give it a 6.5 out of 10. I get what they were going for, but overall, I think the fight sequences are really dope in this movie as well. So that's what it's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, undoubtedly, this is going to be one of our shorter episodes because I think, again, I don't think that speaks to that this movie is significantly worse than the others, but just in terms of discussion points, I'm not sure that there is as much to talk about. And I think I'm right there with you. I'm at about a 6 or 6.5 out of 10 as well. I think, again, I love the fact that this movie is also 90 minutes, and boy howdy, if this movie had much more misogynistic tendencies, I think this would have been a real struggle at 2 hours. Yeah, so much sexism, the wacky plot. I just really want a consistent release for all of these movies, and I know that some of them are available through Amazon and iTunes and whatnot, but I would really like to just corral all of these movies together, get them the proper names, get them the proper respect, get them a decent release. Yeah, that's really what I want. And again, this for me is not the best Donnie Yen showcase, and we will be talking about Donnie Yen in a couple of weeks. A little tease for you, so you've got that to look forward to, but not a great introduction to Donnie Yen, I would say.
For me, I was kind of surprised because I didn't expect this side of him. I thought it was going to be more of the badass side based on what I read on the plot synopsis, but he leaned into the comedy, so I was kind of surprised. And he looks young as fuck in this movie, so. And he still looks good, like, for his age today. Like, no lie, like, he looks like he could be 10 years younger than what he's saying. So, whatever he's doing with his skin, good for him, because he still looks like the Donnie Yen of 94 almost. I don't know if you agree with me on that, but there is something in his genes where he kind of looks like this eternal youth, kind of like what Keanu Reeves has going for him now, because he still looks decent enough where he can pull off being that middle-aged kung fu hero in the John Wick movie. So, and they were in John Wick 4 together, so I guess it all makes sense. But yeah, I think Donnie Yen, decent showcase, but not the best of his abilities. But it's a good transition for what we're going for next week. And my MVP is going to be Yu Wu Ping. He's the director. Held the ship together. I almost went with Elsa Tang because it was actually a female writer of this movie, a solo female writer, which shows you a lot about the male characters in this movie. Because yeah, that's probably what was going on in the culture at the time. Yeah, probably a strong number 2. And then the best performance, I'll go with Michelle Yeoh, because she was a badass and she was like doing the romantic comedy stuff, and she was acting kind of like. There was this one scene I did like, was like, you probably didn't like it. It was the foot massage scene, and they were kind of letting their guard down and kind of acting like, just hanging out with the girls. And sometimes I think you need that in rom-coms to kind of show you the side that we don't normally see. You know what I mean? So I think that was a good little scene for her.
Yeah, I don't think that scene was necessarily bad. It's just I wish we had almost had more of that as opposed to what we got. So I think that's kind of where I come down. I would agree with you. I think Michelle Yeoh gives the best performance here. For me, the director Yuan Wu Ping is the MVP. I think, just especially in terms of putting the action together, the director is the person that I'm going to give a lot of the credit for. So for now, I think we're going to come back in a few weeks and maybe do a bonus episode. But for now, we are done with Michelle Yeoh in terms of Punchy Kicky Woman with our theme. Brian, any final thoughts? Any final Michelle Yeoh thoughts you would like to share?
Yeah, she deserves every award that she wins for everything all at once. Yeah, I hope she does more in the future, and I hope this momentum train keeps going. And she doesn't necessarily always have to do action movies. Just saying, like, she can do a Crazy Rich Asians every once in a while and kind of show you her actual talent. So you never know. Like, give me something weird. Give me a Paul Thomas Anderson movie with Michelle Yeoh.
Yeah, I don't know if she's ever going to be an awards contender again, but I really hope that she works with the Daniels again in some form or fashion. I would really love to see her maybe do another Hong Kong release just to see, how that would turn out. I know that in terms of the Asian market, Korea is where it's at right now. But I would love to see her kind of go back to her roots a little bit and kind of explore there. I'm just a really huge fan of hers, and I think going through this month as we have, and going through the Yes Madams and the Heroic Trios and even the Super Cops, I've just become an even bigger fan. And I mean, look, you and I have seen Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and we've seen Crazy Rich Asians and Everything Everywhere All at Once. And we've even seen, the work she's done in the MCU, both in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 in a very limited capacity, but also seeing what she did more specifically in Shang-Chi. I think she has just been a very consistent performer in her over 40-year career at this point. And yeah, I think what we're going to be getting, so we're going to be continuing our Punchy Kicky theme, but we're going to be going in a very different direction, Brian. And I am so curious to know what your thoughts are about our theme for next month. And maybe you could tell the people what it is.
So it's the IP Man movies, and you've been touting them for a while because you said you bought them digitally like a while ago and been waiting for the chance to review and watch them. So we kind of set it up this way where we can finally watch these movies. Jerome hasn't watched them yet. He's been telling me he's been wanting to watch them. It's been sitting in his iTunes for a while apparently, so we're gonna watch them. I almost bought the set the other day when I was shopping around for some movies, but we'll see on that one because I might just watch them digitally and then buy it after. But I was very tempted to buy it already in a set. But there's 4 IP Man movies. Donnie Yen is the star of all of them, correct?
That is correct, and this is a great time to go over the pronunciation. It is spelled IP Man, but they are pronounced Yip Man.
Yip Man. Okay, and try not to get confused finding this movie because there are other Yip Man movies that are not associated with this one, just other variations of the same tale, this legend of the Ip Man or whatever. So we're gonna get into that. It's gonna be interesting because it's more the modern era of Hong Kong, Chinese martial arts filmmaking. We've seen a lot of the older era, the 80s and 90s, and now we're going to the modern era. And let me tell you, like when I was working at Blockbuster, these movies were rented all the time, like all the time, and I felt bad because like my coworkers were like, you never watch these Eat Man movies?" And he's like, "They're really good," and I'm just like, I guess I don't know, maybe I'll watch them, and I just never got to watch them. So this is the perfect opportunity for that. Jerome's gonna be hosting, and I'm kind of excited because like we're in this kung fu, martial arts kind of feel right now with all these movies we're watching. So I'm really looking forward to the action sequences and what they can do in the modern era. And like I mentioned, Donnie Yen is this internally youthful guy, so he's probably going to look the same as he did in Wing-Chun.
Yes, there are 4 Yip Man movies, so we will be reviewing all 4 as we go through the month of May, and then we are going to do a bonus at the end, because there are 5 Tuesdays in the month of May. We will be doing something extra at the end of that month. So for Brian, my name is Jerome. Thank you so much for listening. We will talk to you again next week as we will be continuing our theme, but this time we'll be talking about Donnie Yen.
Everybody have fun tonight. Everybody Wing Chun tonight.